Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Refold Podcast, where we talk about everything related to language learning. My name is Clayton, also known as George Pig, and I manage the community here at Refold. Today, we have a very special guest and Refold employee, Ben. I'll be having a casual interview with him, so if you're interested in the people behind the curtain, this is the episode for you. All right. Hey, Ben, how's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing okay. So it's good to have you on the podcast once again. You were on, I think, early on in season 1 or season 2.
Yeah, I think it was a couple months ago at this point. Forget what we talked about, but I've been here the whole time. I've been editing every single one. So
Right. So Ben is our editor, and he wears a lot of hats at Refold. So I guess this is going to be a little bit of an interview. I'm excited. So
okay.
Ben, why don't you introduce yourself for those of you who, for the listeners who don't really know you and all the stuff that you do, and you do a lot of stuff behind the scenes.
Okay. I'm Ben. I'm from Oregon. I do a lot
You
of
sound
things
like
at
you're not
Refold.
sure.
I'm not sure. You didn't prepare me for this. You just said that I was going to be on the podcast. Let's see. I run the YouTube channel. I'm an admin in the Spanish server. I do stuff there. I think about Refold a lot. I work on a lot of the various things behind the scenes. I don't really know what to talk about. It's not that interesting.
I think it is interesting. I think a lot of people do not understand the team, especially people who are not highly visible. But you do make tutorials and stuff, so they
Yeah, I've
should be
been.
at least somewhat acquainted with you. You also did the outro.
Yes,
So
that's true.
how did you get into language stuff? I think we were both English teachers at one point.
Yeah. I originally got into language stuff in high school because we had to take a language, and I picked German. So I was like, Spanish is dumb at that point. And my school actually offered a lot of different languages. It was really cool. There was French, Cantonese, no, Mandarin, sorry. French, Mandarin, Russian, Arabic, German, Spanish. I think that's everything. But there was a lot of different languages offered, and some of the languages had multiple teachers. Like there was like 3 Spanish teachers, there was 2 French teachers. I think 1 for everything else. But I started with German, and I did 2 years of German. Then I was like, hey, I really like this. This is really cool. And so I stuck around. I took a year of Arabic in the 4th year because I had also gotten into just language and linguistics in general, especially conlangs was one of my big interests. Constructed languages where you kind of create your own language or somebody or whatever it might be. So I was into conlangs for a couple of years.
Are you
And
still into conlangs now?
I think they're interesting and cool. I haven't sat down and like actually like taken time on them for a long time. It's been
I like the idea of auxiliary languages, like helping languages, but I think they're neat, like the art langs and stuff, or people for world building. But like,
yeah, that was
I don't
my
know if I would
interest.
ever. Yeah, I don't know if I would ever learn one, but I could see myself learning,
Hmm.
an Oxlang.
Yeah, I'm not interested like linguistically in Oxlangs at all. Like I think Interslavic's cool, stuff like that. But and I love Tokipona. I think it's really interesting. I haven't learned it. I will soon, actually.
You
But
will soon. I think there's somebody in the Refold community who's like making some like really cool CI
yeah,
videos, maybe for Takipona.
he's doing 30, 20 minutes pure CI Tokipona videos. And I've been downloading his subtitles to analyze them because I just haven't had access to subs or like just written Tokipona anywhere. And because there's no like words just don't change at all. The text analysis is really, really easy. So I can just use like a spreadsheet to look at
How
the
many words are in Takipona?
words, like head words. It's like 125. There are, I
And
think, created compound words that are like agreed upon by the community, but those don't really count.
like
Um,
Yanpona, good person's a friend.
so I think so. Like I'm not exactly sure because I don't know the language,
Speak
but
it.
it is, I think it's really interesting as well because of its simplicity. You can show concepts like grammar or my main interest is phonology because the phonology is very, very simple, yet there are still rules.
It's
You can learn
always
about,
reminded me of some of the easternmost Austronesian languages, like the ones that you get in like Oceania, like like Tuvalu
yeah, it
and
was
Samoan.
a big part of its inspiration was Tokpisin, I think,
Okay.
which is an English Creole
Hmm.
I don't know exactly where it's from, but
Papua New
it's,
Guinea.
yeah. And so that was a big inspiration for it in terms of simplicity and grammar structure and stuff. And so I just think it's a really cool way to also just learn about languages in general because it is such a boiled down version that it helps understand concepts that are actually there in natural languages.
Yeah, and for those of you who do not know, Takipona is, I guess it's like an art lang. It was a thought experiment, a language with very few words, very simple phonology, but the community has taken it and run with it, and some people want to turn it into an oxlang, which is where my interest in it comes, because I think it would be cool.
And
Uh,
auxlang or auxiliary language is a language that is made not really to be a native language by people, but like to aid in communication between peoples or communities or
like Esperanto.
whatever. Yes, exactly. Oh,
Very cool.
maybe you should have Afro on. He's been an Esperanto speaker
I
for a
would love to
while.
have Afro on, actually. He's got a YouTube channel, and he, in addition to refolding Spanish, is an Esperantist, and he's
Nice.
quite into the grammar and stuff. That would be neat, actually. I'm going to
I'll
see if I can have him on.
Yeah, I'll DM him.
Yeah,
I've got
awesome.
his
I would
number.
love to have him on. We can talk about Esperanto and his experiences, and yeah, believe it or not, you can actually refold Esperanto. They have a whole bunch of translated and original media out there.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know there's original stuff.
Oh yeah, there's heaps. People like to write in it. I don't know how good any of it is. I know I dabbled in Esperanto briefly, and I read some original stuff, and it was bad. But I read bad stuff in every language.
Yeah, I was just
I'm
gonna
really into
say
the.
I've
I,
seen
I
your
read.
interests.
Yeah, I read like the trash fiction, Wattpad, archive of our own kind of things. So, but I'm reading a real book now. I'm reading Coraline in Spanish, and it's all right
Yeah,
for being a real book for kids. Now, in the past, you've done a lot of languages. Right now, what are you working on, language-wise?
just Spanish. I'm really just focused on. Okay, not really that focused, arguably. Um, well, I've been pretty good this last month or so.
You're really
Um,
dedicated. I think we had a conversation. You said that you don't actually do that much input, but you do it consistently every single day.
yeah, I don't think I do that much input. Um,
Compared to like other
so
immersion
to,
learners.
yeah, because I read every day for probably 45 minutes on average recently. I watch a couple YouTube videos and I occasionally watch movies. I'm just not that heavy input right now. Audiobooks. I do a ton of audiobooks. Um, but the fact, like, I'm very consistent with it. Yeah, that's my superpower, I guess. I was looking at my Kindle stats. I've got 110 days of reading streak and 80 weeks. There hasn't been a week in 80 weeks that I haven't read. And I'm pretty sure that's when I got my Kindle. Um, I'm actually working on a video that sort of features that. I shared that with you today. It's
Yes, I
about
like that video.
how to become a reader again. So
Yeah, and you mentioned audiobooks. You were into audiobooks in English too as a young person, right?
I was practically raised by Jim Dale, who's the original narrator of the Harry Potter series. Fantastic voice, probably my favorite narrator out there. If you want a good English audiobook, The Night Circus, narrated by Jim Dale, is oof, incredible. It's artistic. It's so good. But yeah, I listened to a lot of audiobooks growing up. I had a little iPod Nano, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but it had this little tiny screen. It was my dad's old iPod. But I didn't fill it with music. I just loaded it with audiobooks and I would listen to them again and again and again and again. My estimate is that I've read or listened to the entire Harry Potter series at least 20 times because of audiobooks. Like, I don't think that's an understatement. It's like a lot. Um,
Yeah, and when you say you listen to audiobooks, we should clarify, you're big into Brando Sando, right?
Now I'm into Brandon Sanderson. Yes.
And some
Uh,
of his audiobooks are like 80 hours long.
I just finished, what's it called? Palabras Radiantes, which was 50 hours. That took me, I think, 2 months. That was pretty slow because it's also just a slow series. but pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah, a few people, a couple of the Refold clients, and then also Ben, have convinced me that I need to drop my link subscription for an Audible subscription. I think they're onto something. I think they're right. So, you
For
know,
as much as I don't like Amazon, like $15 a month to just have a book that you can just listen to as many times as you want, to me has always been like I don't use a book a month. Like I often cancel. Currently, I don't think I have a subscription because I have enough books that I have a backlog. But any book of any length is just $15 is pretty good, especially if you look at a lot of print books. A short paperback book is like $15. And so like you just have this wide open space. I've heard that's because they have a pretty terrible revenue split for authors, which is not amazing, but like I don't know, it's so easy just to get. I feel bad, but
yeah,
yeah.
15 bucks for unlimited audiobooks is not the worst thing for a software as
It's
a
not
service.
unlimited.
It's not unlimited. It's one per month.
Yeah, you get one, but there's also they have a subscription where it's like Audible Plus or something like that, where like you do have their library of free books that you do have unlimited of. It's sort of like
Gotcha.
Kindle Unlimited, where you pay a couple of dollars a month and you just get all of their books that are in that system. Not all of them are, because again, I'm pretty sure the revenue share for authors is not very fair.
Mhm.
But yeah,
So, speaking of projects, you do a lot of stuff here at Refold. I know I sound like a broken record. You are very creative. You enjoy copywriting, writing things, making courses, anything creative. You're sort of a creative kind of guy.
I
And
like to think so.
what I like to think so too. Outside of Refold, do you have any other projects going on that maybe you could talk about
I
or that
think
you would
you're,
like to do?
yeah, I think you're hinting at my Nahuatl project.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I've been interested in learning Nahuatl, which is one of the native languages to Mexico, where I am now. I've been interested in learning that for a while, and part of the reason is because I want to get better at content creation. So I want to find like real native speakers from around the area, create relationships with them, and then basically make content. The idea is to release it on YouTube so that other people, if anybody else wants to also learn the language, has input and transcripts and things available that are authentic and real. Because that's one of the things for sort of lesser studied languages that they sort of just lack materials. Like there's just no
Good
beginner
choice of
materials.
wording. You didn't say lesser spoken because I feel like Nahuatl has like 1.2 million speakers.
I think it's even more than that if you count all the
It may have
dialects.
more. So
There's
I like your choice of wording, not to call it lesser spoken, because definitely some of these European languages that people get into do have very
oh
few
yeah.
speakers.
Yeah, there's
So,
like some very not widely spoken languages have a lot of materials and some incredibly widely spoken languages don't have any materials.
oh yeah, a
Like
lot of those regional languages in India have 80 million speakers
yeah.
and no material.
Hmm.
Well, native speaker material, but again, a lot of it's going to be like newspapers and
Right.
religious material.
Like I think it'd be so cool for that. I also want to document a process for creating ideally not too expensive content because I'm an actual just one person that can help learners learn interesting and cool language and
Streaming
then
Nahuatl.
sort of something like that, yeah, where you can kind of break into that place where you can actually then talk to regular people, and that's where like the all the content that does exist sort of can flourish, right? Because there's plenty of things that exist in lots of languages, but they're just not super beginner oriented or they're not well documented or whatever. And so just learning about media production, meeting really interesting people around the city, and also just learning a cool language at the same time, it just seems like a win-win-win, right? Um, and yeah, it's a completely unrelated language to anything I speak currently. It's I think it's polysynthetic. It's highly synthetic at the very least. So they
Mhm.
combine lots of pieces to make big long words. It sounds really cool. It's got the tla sound, which I think is just fantastic. Um,
Oddly enough, I think Icelandic and Welsh also have that sound.
tla.
Yeah.
I think
And
that
I
sounds
know it's
right.
in
Yeah.
Zulu. It's in Zulu.
Tla.
So
Yeah.
it's in some languages that I'm aware of. But yes, it's a very cool sound.
Mhm.
Nahuatl. So I've seen a lot of these projects from the community. Tagalog.com.
Hmm.
They've got a great little parser that they've basically built from scratch for Tagalog, which is agglutinative, so not quite as synthetic as Nahuatl, but still a lot of little sticky pieces. Crush from the Cantonese server, he has some sort of project going on for Kichwa.
Quechua. Yeah.
Yeah,
He
so I like to
he's
see
interested
these.
in my project too. Well,
Yeah,
my project hasn't been started yet, but my interest, I guess, my desired project. Um,
I just recently got into Dreamy Spanish. I thought I was beyond it. His advanced material is actually great for when I don't feel like native material.
awesome.
And I think this whole CI creation, I don't know, like it would be cool to have a platform that could support people from different communities while at the same time giving a lot of good value for like
Yeah.
language learners.
Yeah, I would love
So
for there just to be an easy process for people that are proud and happy with their language to easily create things for learners, not things that are super cheap or that they don't really know what they're doing, but they can actually do helpful materials that are useful to lots of different people, would just be so cool. Um, and then you could go out and fund, ideally, like actual speakers to essentially save languages. Um, I'm not going to be any kind of grand conservationist or anything like that, but like it'd be cool to at least be a part of something like that.
it would be a cool platform. I know that
Yeah.
Glossica has done something similar, not with CI, but they've got their Glossica Viva, I think they call it, where like you can translate the Glossica material, which are just sentences. It's just a sentence
Mhm.
bank essentially, and you get paid every time someone listens to one of the sentences you trade, like that you translated. It's
Mhm.
not like perfect. I don't think they actually make that much, but it's an
Yeah.
interesting idea. Uh, so
Yeah.
looking here,
I feel like
oh,
something
go
like
ahead.
this would have to just get funding from governments or something
Mhm.
that's like altruistic, just because I don't think there's a ton of actual sort of money in the space. But
There's not a lot of
yeah.
money in language learning in general, I think. I think people
Well,
tend to undervalue it, maybe outside of like teaching English
yeah, like I'm like I'm gonna say, I think like actual language teaching, like the success of italki, for example, like Duolingo, like it's pretty clearly a big market. Um, it's just like it's only for certain languages, like for economically viable languages. Like learning English can have a pretty significant economic impact for a lot of people,
for sure.
sort of thing. But like learning Thai as an American is purely a passion project.
Yeah, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of languages and Spanish, why don't you tell us a little bit about your Spanish journey? So, do you have a dialect you're focusing on?
Mexican.
Mexican. And within Mexican, do you
Yeah.
have a dialect you're focusing on?
I was going sort of norteño for a
Mhm,
while. I've kind of gone away from that because people, because I now live in Mexico City, and a lot of people don't like. It's kind of just a meme unless you actually have a full-on norteño accent, which I
mhm.
could do. I just haven't been super focused on an accent specifically. I just got told that I use a lot of words from the south of the city, um, by somebody, and I was like, oh, I didn't mean to. Um, but so yeah, I guess it's kind of sort of northern Mexico City dialect. Um,
Like northern tinged Mexico City standard
yeah,
central
that's
Mexico.
for like somebody who was born in Coahuila, then moved to the city when they were like 10, maybe.
Gotcha. Well, oh, I'm a little bit disappointed to hear that. I was hoping that you were still going to embrace your inner norteño and adopt the accent.
Maybe I'll go back to it. I do like accents a lot.
This is not your first time living in Mexico, right? You also lived up north.
Yeah, for a good part of the pandemic, I was I was technically living in Juarez, in Ciudad Juarez in the north. But because it was COVID, it was inside most of the time. So like it was like go to the restaurant, get food, go back home. Like it was not really living in Mexico. Plus, it's a terrible city, so would not recommend living there.
Right? You had other connections, which is why you ended up there, not because you just love Ciudad Juarez.
No, I don't think anybody does.
Yeah,
Even the people from there are just like, I don't know. I kind of just live here.
yeah. I don't know. It's one of those. They got that. What's the word for it? There's a special word for those like kind of like factories that exist up in the north.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I don't know the word you're looking for, but it's
I can't
definitely
think of the
very
word.
much people are there because of the border, right? The border
Right.
is,
They
in fact,
manufacture NAFTA stuff.
lots of stuff. I think they do a lot of like the Invisalign there, I think as well. But you know how Texas has like that big straight kind of section in the kind of top leftish, and then it like
Mhm.
has that little jot over
I
to
think
the
it's called a
left.
panhandle.
Yeah, I guess, but like there's that like little tiny like direct right angle to the left or to the west. That's sort of just to encompass El Paso and Juarez because of the economic sort of connection there.
Gotcha.
And it's funny, the time zones are also interesting because El Paso is not on the same time zone as a lot of Texas, but Juarez is on the same time zone as El Paso. But because Mexican and US time zones are different, Juarez is on a different time zone than the rest of the state of Chihuahua, which is like this weird time zone change. So if you start in El Paso and you just like go directly south, or sorry, if you start in Albuquerque and you go directly south, you go through like 4 time zones in one day. It's really weird.
I've heard of that actually happening in the States too. When I was a kid, Indiana used to be divided on their time zones and what they wanted to follow, especially relating to like daylight savings time. And it depended on whether they did business with east of Indiana, so like the states to the east, or if they did business west of
Mm.
Indiana, so Chicago area, Illinois. Um, so it doesn't surprise me that much because I'm kind of used to it as from when I was a kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
time
So
zones are interesting.
how are you liking Mexico? You just got back.
I've been here for like 2 months.
No, not 2 months. It's been like what, a month?
No, it's
Has
it's
it been two
February.
months?
January is over,
Okay.
my guy.
Oh well. Okay. In that case, how are you liking Mexico now that you're back?
I'm
Even though
enjoying it.
you've been back for a couple months.
Yeah, it's stressful because I don't I've been staying in temporary places recently,
Mhm.
but tomorrow morning I have my meeting and signing for a new place, so I'm really excited for that. I'm excited to just build a place to stay more permanently and start to get into habits, right? Because I was talking to you yesterday, but like my days have been so similar for the past week because like I've just been sort of too stressed out to like do much more than work
Yeah.
and then eat and then hang out and then go to bed. Like, so I'm really excited to have that more variety in there. I've been really loving the food. I've been exploring lots
Any
of different
surprises with the
restaurants.
food? So that's one of your hobbies outside of languages is actually cooking food, sort of
Yeah,
like a foodie.
I love
You
food.
bake bread, sometimes pizzas. I don't know if you bake like cakes though. I don't know if it's the same type of baking.
I actually, for a summer, I think 5 years ago, I sold pies as my summer job.
Oh,
I would make a big old batch of 5 to 10 pies, and I would go to my dad's work and I would just sell them. And
yeah.
that was
If
really
I had
fun.
to sum up your hobbies, it would be language learning, uh, cooking slash baking, and Magic the Gathering, based on what I know
Yeah,
about you.
you could. I would extend that into just tabletop games,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's
Tabletop
primarily
games.
Magic. Yeah, like I have an interest in chess. I'm terrible. I like playing regular board games. I'm fine, but Magic is the one that is the big
Right. When you used to do the
time investment.
Spanish night, you encourage people to do things like code names and other.
No, we did code names. That was actually really fun because there's a site called Board Game Arena, I think, and I got all I needed was one premium account, and then you can have as many people play with you as you want. And we had a lot of just games in Spanish. A lot of it's translated by fans, and so there was fan translations, and we played lots of cool board games online. Um, and so if people want suggestions of things to do in your target language with friends, Board Game Arena is fantastic.
And right now, aren't you playing like some single player RPGs in Spanish?
Yes, you're spoiling another video though.
Oh, oh, I keep spoiling things. I am
No,
so
it's fine.
sorry.
No. It's solo RPGs. So like they're basically journaling RPGs. In essence, they are a random prompt generator hooked up to a world or a scenario or something like that that you then write about. So I use like a dictionary or language tool or even some italki sessions to correct and get better at writing. So Again,
Yeah,
that'll be another video soon ish.
I think Bree has joined you on that. I have not taken the plunge.
I don't know. I think she's just hyped about it. I don't think she's actually started.
She's just hyped.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah, you one of your hobbies is food and cooking. Have you found anything great in Mexico? Anything
yes,
unexpected?
I was walking home from something. I don't remember exactly what. And I was kind of hungry. I was like, what am I going to eat? And I looked next to me, and there's this little Korean restaurant full of Korean people, people speaking Korean. There's a guy like just who gets up, like has his cigarette, smokes it, goes back in, is like shouting to his friend in Korean. I'm just like, okay, this place looks kind of legit. So I go in, and it was fantastic. They had uh, all the little side dishes. I think it was like 9 side dishes, like of just little bits, and then I got the bulgogi or whatever, and it was really really good. It was like $15. I'm going back there this Sunday actually. I made a date because I just wanted to go back. It's like this time I'm going to get the oh god, what's it? It's not sake. It's the Korean version. It's the most like it's
Soju?
like the yeah, it's the most sold liquor in the world. Yeah, soju. I'm gonna get some soju. I'm gonna get some delicious Korean food, and it's gonna be
Yeah, soju is really popular in the Philippines.
mm,
Soju, particularly the chamisul version. I'm not actually a big drinker, and have not been since the pandemic. I used to drink a little bit before the pandemic. Would go to some 24-hour places and go after
mhm.
hours because I'm a little bit of a shy guy, and I've not. I don't drink alone, and since I've not been going out till recently, not had a drink. But yeah, chamisul, very popular in the Philippines for some
Cool.
reason. So it's interesting to me that this Korean place is really good in Mexico because I've had some Asian food in Mexico and it was some of the worst food I've
Oh
ever
yeah,
had.
I have had some pretty bad noodles and pad thai. It's like there's why is there rice in here? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's why I was sort of suspicious originally. And like I
Mhm.
went in. Also, my I think the worst thing about Mexico, for like hands down, is the fact that every single sushi roll has cream cheese in it. I think that's a travesty. I hate cream cheese in sushi.
Yeah, you are braver than I am uh, with sushi in Mexico. The only time I got sick when I lived in Mexico was when I ate salad and I didn't treat the fruits and vegetables before I put them in the salad.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, the water can certainly be interesting and it can affect things. Um, I've found that kind of getting sick once just means that you kind of just get used to it. Like I've been eating fresh
do
fruit
you
and
buy the little
stuff.
like purple dropper things for your vegetables and stuff?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I've
because
just
they're
been going with it and it's been fine.
oh,
Like,
I'm a big fan of salad sandwiches. Actually, it sounds really weird. I used to be a vegetarian for a long time, and it's just literally putting what you would eat in a salad on like a small like bolillo or whatever of bread and having at it, and they're quite refreshing. But I think
okay.
that's actually what got me sick because I was lazy and I stopped buying the little purple dropper and
Mhm.
treating my vegetables.
Yeah, I definitely got pretty sick by having a torta on the street. But that was
I
back
love
in,
tortas.
oh, they're so
Oh, they're so
good.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
I'm a
lot
big
of,
fan of the salchichas ones. Salchichas with the
oh,
strips, the rajas. They're really
yeah.
good.
I don't love the sort of salchichas as much, but like there's, in the place I was staying in December, there was a fantastic pork place. Like they just like slow roast just these most incredible succulent pigs every day. Um, right next to this just place that had just wonderful chicken sandwiches.
Yeah, I believe it. Tortas are one of the best. I don't know. They're underappreciated too, because if like you're in the States and you go for Mexican food, people don't think, oh, I want a torta, right?
Hmm.
So now, beyond languages, beyond food, you're also a voice actor. That's one of your interests, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I am a voice actor. It's an
I call
interest.
you a voice actor when I do support tickets. When they say, "Oh, who's the voice?" I'm like, "Oh, that's a professional voice actor." So maybe I'm lying, but I
Sure.
definitely consider you one
I mean,
because you've been
technically, I
paid
have
to
I
do
have
it,
been
right?
paid to do voice work. So
So
yes,
you're
I guess you're
technically a
correct.
pro.
Um, Yeah, and actually it's more narration. Narration is the thing
Oh,
that I'm
okay.
really interested in. I'm also interested in acting
What's
in general,
what's
but
the difference for those of us who are not super into this stuff?
so voice acting would be things like a TV show or an animation, anime, things like that. That's like you're acting a character. Narration is more for voiceover. So things like a documentary, or in my case, audiobooks are what I'm really interested in. It's You're not really being a character; you're giving information in a way. I think there's a little more sort of like it's like narration with a little hint of acting that's in audiobooks, which is a big reason that I enjoy
Okay.
certain narrators more, is because they have just more life to them. And that's also why I like Jim Dale so much, is because his character voices just have this whole other side to them, but you can still tell that it's like it's one person just reading you this lovely story. Um, and
So
so yeah, that's like the main difference.
now that you've told me the difference, I understand. So I'm really into web fiction. So like I
Hmm.
read a lot of like Wattpad, some of the Reddit writing subs. I just like it. It's convenient. I've always got my tablet or my phone.
Great.
But there's a really big problem with narrators stealing content. So they see a really cool story that's published on Reddit or something, and they don't credit the original. They don't get permission. And there's a whole bunch of these on like Spotify podcasts or YouTube.
Mm.
A lot of those narrations, if you ever listen to a narration, there's a good chance that they stolen.
Yeah, there's sort of almost like epidemic of like, especially within like smaller creators, of not even like outright theft. It's just like not really understanding how these things should work. Like copyright and um, artist compensation and things like that are just sort of really touchy subjects for lots of people. But then also there's not a ton of actual like recourse or recompense for smaller people because they aren't owned by multi-million-dollar record labels or whatever that have actual power of like attorney and things. And so it creates this almost culture and ability to kind of get away with stuff where it's like, what are you going to do? And so it is rough for sure.
And it makes it
And
sort of adversarial where it shouldn't be. Ideally,
yeah.
narrators and authors would work together. But I think a
Mhm.
lot of authors have been burned by, people narrating without their consent, that they're hesitant to give consent to narrators who do go through the proper channels.
Yeah, artists as well have been burned a lot because it's pretty easy just to take an image and just use it.
Hmm.
It's There's actually a pretty big thing within Magic last year, the year before, where the giant multi-million dollar company in a card that was printed used art from just a community member because the artist that they had paid had taken some art from somebody because it was inspired from their original piece. And so it like had this like weird loop where very clearly the small person had been stolen from, right, by a
Right.
pretty large corporation. But it's just not as cut and dry because there's just so many different things, and it's sort of sad that it's harder to get compensation for work. It's a big thing within acting and voice acting as well, where because it's pretty competitive and it's like this aspirational job where like people's like, oh, being an actor is a privilege. People will work for way cheaper than they should, or they will undercut other actors because they're more desperate. It's like it just creates
Hmm.
this animosity amongst the people, and it makes it harder to unionize or actually get compensated well unless like the person paying is happy to pay more, even though theoretically it exists for cheaper if they like look the
Is
other
there
way.
a
It's like,
voice actors guild the same way there's an actors guild?
yeah, I think it's literally called the Voice Actors Guild. I think there's also SAG-AFTRA is also has voice acting in it. Um, but it's still, especially if you're an amateur, right? It's hard to break through. It's hard to get actual money paid because like equipment is also expensive. It's not easy. It's one I did a course, and one of the things like that they sort of said was just make sure not to undersell yourself. It's gonna not only is going to hurt yourself, but it's also going to hurt all of the other narrators and voice actors in the space,
One of those
right?
industries that could easily turn into a race to the bottom
Hmm.
when it comes to payment, I guess.
Yeah,
Because being an English teacher was that way too, to some degree.
yeah.
Um, so I know what it's like. People undercutting people. Some people who are incredibly desperate would teach $5 an hour. You
Hmm.
know, I'm talking really low stuff.
Yeah, being an English teacher was really interesting. I taught on italki for a long time, honestly. I think I have over 2,000 lessons completed. Not exactly sure. Um, and I did it full time for a while, at least a year. And a big part of that was because I was able to remove myself from that by having a specialty. I would focus specifically on things that most other teachers just couldn't offer. And so
Mhm.
I was able to sort of pull myself out of that. I would often look at the community, the teacher community, and they'd be like, I can't get students. How do I do this? Because italki basically had the habit of saying okay to like any teacher. And then there would be that race at the bottom, like you exactly said. And I was like, I'm really glad that I'm not just a run of the mill English teacher right now because it looks terrible. It looks so
Right.
hard.
Having a specialty.
Hmm.
So in my case, teaching pronunciation, and then also, unfortunately, I got into test prep. Um, I'm not a huge fan of
Hmm.
IELTS or anything, but a lot of students do need specific IELTS help. So I buckled down. I learned about IELTS, and I got a little certification thing from
Oh,
Cambridge, and I did IELTS just to set myself up apart.
yeah.
Um, and it's not my favorite thing to teach because you're teaching a test. You're teaching test prep. You're not teaching a language. And I
Hmm.
think you specialized in pronunciation, right?
Yeah, pronunciation and sounds and realizing why you don't sound like an American, even though. So most of my students were like upper intermediate to advanced learners. Many of them worked full time in English, but they were like, I just can't make myself understood a lot of the time, or I have a really heavy accent, or whatever it was. And so we'd work on kind of why that was. We dive into the American accent. We talk about flow and rhythm. We talk about
Mhm.
sounds, lots of different little niches. But I did have a couple students who were wanted to pass their IELTS speaking part, and most of them were pretty bad students.
I would agree.
They're like, "Why can't I just study this away?" I'm like, "That's not how language works. I'm sorry."
An interesting thing about students as well that I noticed over my 5 years of being an English teacher, the ones who book you the most are the worst. They're the ones who do not spend time outside of school or outside of class. Um, they tend to be wealthier individuals who can afford multiple classes, and they want the language to be spoon fed. And unfortunately, as we know at Refold, you have to spend a lot of time. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week is not really going to cut it.
Yeah, I had the number of students like I don't really get how you schedule a session while you're doing something else. Like the number of students that were
Oh
like
yeah,
cooking or driving or playing the PlayStation at the same time as like our lesson was like a surprisingly high number.
it's
Like,
very interesting. You mentioned driving. I've taught all over, but a certain demographic, people in Middle East and North Africa, are very guilty of driving while doing it. And a lot of my
mhm.
East Asian students will be at a bar somewhere, like a bar, or they'll be sitting down having food and wanting to chat. I'm like, this is awkward, but sure, let's go for it, I guess.
Wanting to chat, I can get, but also like
Right. And
that's
again,
not
my
what my class
teaching,
was.
I price myself much lower than you. And I
Yeah.
also did teach just conversational English,
Hmm.
which attracts a different type of demographic. But I've definitely had people in bars,
Hmm.
just passing me around, having fun. And it's a strange experience. As much as I love language, teaching language almost started to kill that passion.
Hmm. Yeah, I was lucky enough to have a lot of really great students. Towards the end, I was almost had just regulars, but it did become difficult to like focus on the language afterwards because it just wasn't as full of passion. I guess I think, like you said, like with Refold, it's not too hard to finish work and then like go do more language stuff because I've been able to do a lot of the stuff that I enjoy that I think is interesting and then sort of apply those things. So it's like it's not the worst thing in the world. Sure, I don't get as much time as if I was to like be doing a completely separate job, probably, but it's not the same as like English teaching where you're just like, I just don't want to do any Spanish today because I'm just done. I don't want to think about acquisition
Well,
or
yeah,
anything.
carrying a conversation or leading a class can be quite draining. versus sort of knowledge work, typing
Mhm.
things up, writing things, copywriting.
Yeah, I think my maximum was 6 hours of sessions in a day. I just couldn't do more.
Yeah, that would be my upper limit as well. Now, speaking of italki, are you currently doing anything with them as a student or as a worker?
I've been taking a session a week. I found a Mexican guy who's good at um, looking at writing and sort of talking about it. Um, just like one 30-minute session a week is all I do right now. No, I've pretty much been completely removed from them. I think there's a lot of stuff that they really should do to support teachers more. Um, but it's not my fight anymore.
Hmm. And how are you liking being a student, being on the other side?
It's not amazing. I lead our classes actually. Um,
Hmm.
I say this is what I want to do. Just if something sounds weird, stop me. I don't think that enough people use native speaker sessions in the right way. I think they are looking for a teacher, which is really not the right method. Instead, you should be looking for like somebody to act as um, your alarm bell for the language, right? If you say something that just sounds awkward, that's where they sort of step in, like because you don't quite have that filter yet to fix it yourself. Where they come in and say, "Oh, that was a little awkward," or "That wording sounds a lot like you're from Spain," or whatever it is, right? And so those sorts of things, rather than trying to say, "Today we're going to learn the present subjunctive." The present subjunctive is mostly used for. It's like, oh my god, no, you don't
No,
know what you're talking about.
Ethan is also doing his sort of output stuff with a teacher, and he's also mentioned that there's just a whole bunch of traditional grammar stuff that a lot of teachers have hardwired into them,
Yeah.
especially monolingual teachers.
Yep. I've noticed that it's really hard for teachers not to mention things that are like sometimes I literally just make a typo and they're like want to focus on it. I'm like, I just spelled it wrong. It's fine. I do
I've
that in
seen your
English
spelling in
constantly.
English, so that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So
And my spelling is
yeah,
not amazing.
yeah,
Um
it sounds like you're doing like corrected writing. You're writing and then maybe speaking out loud.
yeah, so I've been actually doing a lot of output in the past or a lot of output practice in the past month. Um and I've been doing reading aloud. So I just have a book that I'm reading aloud for about 10, 12 minutes a day. I'm doing a little bit of chorusing every day, only about 5 minutes on average. I am doing some writing every day, or most days as well. And then to sort of cap that all off, I do about one short session a week where I do corrected writing, where I read my writing aloud, and every sort of paragraph or so, we stop and we look at what can be maybe improved or what sounds a bit awkward or what is just wrong, things like that. And so I get this pretty good balance of just pure output out in the world because I live in a Spanish speaking country now, as well as some actual practice to help focus on those things and improve little bits here and there.
Yeah, and you mentioned reading out loud. Uh, that actually is underutilized, I think, by a lot of refolders, a lot of immersion learners,
Yeah, I don't really know exactly why. I think it might come from that idea of people saying the
like
sort of sub
fossilization.
vocalizing is a problem. But if you sort of know what's going on, being able to see the words and say them, especially for a closely related language like Spanish and English, is really helpful because there's so many words that I just read instantly because I know. But I'm like, wait, actually, I don't say that very well, right? Whatever it is. Like, I just saw the word, I don't know, demonstración, right? Like, that is a cognate. But like, what if you don't have the
It's a
pronunciation
super
right?
transparent cognate.
Yeah, like there's a lot of those. Um, and so being able to practice those aloud and hear them, because I also practice with my monitor in so I can hear myself live, um, I think is a really helpful thing. And I could just do it for a while, right? Because I also have high enough reading comprehension that I can also understand the story at the same time. I get to practice my flow and my rhythm. And I think it's a really useful thing that it's also just so easy to do. I actually record it. So I pull up Audacity, I hit record, I start my timer, and I turn on my monitor, and then I just read for a bit. So there's like just no setup. Like
And
if you
does that
got
sort of play into your interest in being a narrator? It's sort of like
it
narration
must.
practice.
I think it has to be. like I'm interested in the way that words flow together and how you put sentences, how you combine sentences and words to make them sound natural, right? Because if I don't know if you've ever been in a classroom and somebody's reading aloud and it's just the most boring thing ever, and it's hard to understand, even though they're not making mistakes because it's so monotonous. And so I find it really interesting how just that vocal inflection and the way that you put your words together creates a different story, right? That's sort of where that narration comes in. So it must be my interest in that. But I do think it's a thing that a lot of people can do.
I've been told when I read aloud in Filipino, I sound like a newscaster. Something about the prosody that I read.
Mhm.
I tend to chunk what I'm reading, and it doesn't quite sound. It sounds like a newscaster,
Yeah, it's
essentially.
not natural, but it's also not unnatural.
Right.
Yeah. I definitely sound a bit newscastery always, but that's a different
You do
issue.
sound newscastery always. Um, and I've also I've gotten comments on your old outro for the podcast
Mhm.
where how it cuts from, just sort of organic speech to the sort of newscastery uh
It's an
outro.
outro.
It's an
What do you
outro.
want from
I
me?
Hey, people just like to give feedback.
Sure.
Everybody has an opinion.
Everyone's a critic.
Do you think you'll ever be able to work as like a narrator in Spanish someday? Is that like a goal of yours, or would that be something nice to have?
I would love to do things in Spanish, like professionally.
Mhm.
I think it'd be such a cool experience and sort of like to make it so to speak in
Mhm.
Spanish. It's like especially if I could do some kind of bilingual role would be just a dream come true. Um, once I'm
It would
settled
be
in,
cool. It would be cool if you narrated the same book or the same piece in English and Spanish.
yeah, one of the things that I want to do in for the refill tutorials that I've been making, once YouTube approves the because there's this feature where you can add two audio tracks to a video. And but you have to like it's in beta, so you have to ask for it. They haven't approved it yet, but once we have that option, if they give it to us, I would love to make the tutorials both in English and Spanish, and not with like a robot voiceover. I think it'd be a really cool thing to have the Refold channel be literally the same person recording two versions of the video. Like I don't know, that just sounds really neat to me.
Yeah, it would be cool.
But
I
yeah,
think that supporting our Spanish audience is something that I'm a big believer
mhm.
in.
We already put handmade Spanish subtitles on most videos,
Mhm.
thanks to our lovely Spanish translator Zdena. But um, audio has not come yet.
Yeah,
But
well, maybe in the future.
I was going to say that my dream sort of role would be a bilingual part in like a TV show here in Mexico that has English and Spanish involved.
Mhm.
Would just be so cool. Um,
I want to see you also while you're in Mexico. I want to see you learn to tango or something in
oh
Spanish.
God.
Like now that you're there, I want to see you could use it, learn a skill, something social. You're a social
Yeah,
creature.
I've
Learn
been
to
wanting
tango, go dancing.
to take some dance lessons or something. I'm thinking about doing. I also been needing more exercise recently, and this place I'm moving to has a kickboxing studio right next door. Basically, it's like right across the street, and so I'm thinking about trying that out, just because it would be in Spanish. It's actually a good exercise, and it's really really close.
Those are goals right there. Being able to actually
Mhm.
learn something, not the language, in the language, right? Sort
Yeah,
of
well, I
like,
do all my research and reading about marketing and things like that in Spanish.
mhm.
So I read all my books in Spanish.
You
So
read
it's
30
really
minutes a
nice.
day about certain skills for your job, right?
Yeah, I have 30 minutes after lunch set aside for, I call it reading to learn. It sort of sounds like learning to read, but it's reading to learn.
Mhm.
It's like I'm specifically focused on career growth, reading for about 30 minutes a day. And I've only during the weekdays, but I found it to be really rewarding and helpful. And the fact that it's in Spanish just means that I get free immersion time.
That's awesome. That sort of means you mentioned making it. To me, that means you've made it. You're able to use the skill to learn a different skill.
Sure, I guess that's a reasonable way to look at it. The laddering.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think
I'm
that
still
was a great
terrible though.
podcast. I think that we had a great podcast. We learned a lot about you, Ben. Thank you for
Yeah,
being on.
probably too
And any
much.
parting words before we go?
No, I got
No,
nothing. You should have prepped me
got
for
nothing.
this.
Guys,
Um,
thank you for listening and tuning in. Ben, thank you for being on.
no, yeah, thanks
Stena,
for
thank you as well for
thank you,
helping
Rachel.
Ben with all the Spanish stuff.
Yes, she's been fantastic. But yes, I will see you tomorrow, I guess, at work.
Yes, and you also have to edit this podcast. So
Yes,
you'll
I
be
will be
seeing.
editing it probably right now, actually. We're going to finish it. It's going to upload, then I'm just going to download it and just edit it away because I have a busy day tomorrow. So
So
thank you
sorry for the extra work.
No, it was fine. It was a pleasure, and I will see you soon. And all of you watching, have a fantastic Friday evening or whenever you're listening to this. And I will also see you around.
Thanks for coming and listening to this episode of the Refold Podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck because we have an after party over in the Refold Central Discord server right after. Come join us by using refold.link/join and chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought by liking the video and leaving a comment below. If you have suggestions for upcoming visitors, guests, or even requests for particular topics, please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching or listening, and I'll see you next week.